Hey everyone, welcome along to another episode of the Transplant Strong Podcast. Today I'm joined by Elizabeth. Elizabeth is from America and she is a liver transplant patient. Elizabeth had her transplant last year, so fairly fresh out. Hi Elizabeth, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. So tell me, how did you end up having a liver transplant?
I was diagnosed with PSC, Primary Sclerosing Cholangitis, in 2017. I had been experiencing some just like stomach issues. I had recently had my son, and after that, I had a gallbladder attack in the fall of 2017. And when they did the pathology results for my gallbladder attack, they actually found out that I had PSC. I had never heard of it before, had no idea what it was. So starting in 2017 onward, I had been battling that along with being diagnosed with Crohn's disease in 2002.
How that all come into your life? So 2002 Crohn's, and how was you managing all of that?
So I was managing medications just on top of medications on top of
Yeah.
medications. My Crohn's has been pretty well managed. A lot of just trial and error with that. And then with my PSC from 2017 until my transplant date, I had over 30 stent changes and exchanges back and forth. And after I had spoke to my current team now, they were like, enough is enough. Nothing
Yeah.
is going to change. And they listed me in January of 2024. And I had my transplant July 23rd of 2024.
Wow. So when you were diagnosed with all this, had they told you about possibly needing a liver transplant? Was transplant on the table, or was it sort of a shock?
It was briefly mentioned when I had gotten diagnosed in 2017, but it wasn't nearly as bad. You know, they were like, here's some meds, you know, you'll be fine. And I was doing well up until the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the tipping point for me, where my PSC was flaring. They couldn't get a handle on it. But they just kept saying, you know, you'll need a transplant in like 20 years. 20 years, you'll need one. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. Um, and then in October of 2023, I had actually met with a transplant team, and they're like, you're still another 5 years out. Like, you're
Yeah.
good. Don't worry about it. I had a PSC flare a month later, and they're like, we're listing you.
Oh, wow.
So it came as like a really big shock because I just met and said, you've got time. Don't worry about
Yeah.
it. And then
Yeah. And can you remember how that felt at the time?
It felt like a freight train had hit me. I was sitting in the doctor's office, and then all of a sudden, 5 more people came in I've never seen before, and they're like,
Yeah.
"We're the transplant team," and I was like, "What do you mean?" So I thought I was just going in for another. Hey, can we just exchange some stents out? Let's see how long we can do. And they told me that if they did another stent exchange, I would probably rupture my bile ducts.
Really?
So.
So that was a shock, obviously, and
Mhm.
then they go through the whole process of telling you about the transplant and putting you on the list. And how was your time while you were waiting?
So my case was unique in the sense that I had a living donor. Um, and my team had told me that if I didn't have a living donor, I would end up waiting years on the
Yeah.
transplant list. And they told me, they're like, by the time you would be sick enough to need a liver and get a liver, it would be too late.
Yeah.
So I was at a hospital that promoted living donation. So as soon as I got listed, I took to every social media platform known to man. I talked to everybody. I sent off emails. One, just raising awareness. Most people didn't even know I was sick. I'm sure many know that you don't look sick. So how do
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
that you're sick? Um, and just the waiting process was a roller coaster ride in and of itself, with living donation, going through that process, not knowing, and then getting a phone call. Hey, by the way, we found somebody. So
I was going to say, so was there many potential people that came forward, or did you not deal with that? Did they just go straight to the hospital, and then the hospital kind of tested them and then found out whether they were good enough or whether they were a match?
Yeah. So what the process was for my specific hospital was I had to go and find individuals who wanted to donate. They then talked to the transplant coordinators at the hospital, and then they kind of vetted them out if they were going to be potential matches or not. I did find out that I hold a record at the hospital where I was transplanted at for the most people to sign up to donate a liver to somebody. So the team there that went through people is amazing because they answered phone calls all day long for my case. And I actually met them after my transplant, which was kind of a cool, like, full circle moment. But yeah, so I was just telling people constantly, hey, call the hospital if you think you're interested, call the hospital if you think that you're a match. And then rode the roller coaster of testing and waiting for 7 months.
How does that feel? Because you're obviously, you know, kind of relying on someone to come forward, and you're asking someone to do so much. What's the sort of the thought behind that? How are you feeling by going on social media? And one, like you said, you're sort of telling the world that you're not well, and not many people want to do that. Like I kind of did one video, and I found out that it was kind of helpful to other people, but you know, not everyone wants to do that, which is understandable. So how was it just sort of putting it out there?
It was very nerve-wracking. I never told anybody. You know, some people knew that I had Crohn's just from, you know, when I was in high school that I was sick. So a couple people had known that, but my entire PSC liver journey had been kept close. And I was doing really well up until the last couple of years, you know, so nobody really knew. And then sharing the story, it was kind of twofold of, wait a second, you're sick enough, you need a transplant.
Yeah.
And it was a shock to, you know, family, friends, and stuff like that, of answering questions. How long did you know? Are you sure? And then everybody had an opinion, and everybody had an idea of, you should do this and you should do that. And, you know, which I appreciate, and everybody means well. But yeah, it's been a ride of just waiting, and then you don't know who steps forward. So you don't know, you know, if it's one person, if it's 500 people, and they don't disclose that at all. They just tell you when a match has been found, and that's it.
Yeah. And then, so you never met until after the process?
Yep.
Yeah, because the person that I had before, Jonathan, he had a living donor too. It's a very similar story to yours. But his was in Canada, and he said that they met up a couple of times before the transplant. And they were kind of, I said it must have been weird because you're kind of like going on this weird like date as such, just to sort of find out whether you're a match and whether she wants to donate. And
yeah, I met my donor afterwards. So after I'd gotten home, we were on the same hospital floor. So at our hospital, all transplant patients are on the same floor. So we figured out that we were probably like 3 rooms down from each other. But when I spoke to her, she had said that they really recommended not saying anything until after everything is done. So we connected afterwards, and then found out we live about 20 minutes away from each other. And we've seen each other afterwards. So it's been a really good, it's been a full circle moment of feeling all of the feels. So
are you like best friends now?
We are, you know, it's funny. I talk to her constantly, and we play this game of, do you like this or do you not like this? Because there's things now that I don't like that I used to really love, and there's weird things that I really like now. And I'm like, do you like this? It's your liver. So we like to play that game.
Yeah. And how was the surgery for you?
Surgery was good. I did have a couple bumps afterwards, which were kind of rare, I guess, in the terms of things. I had lost my voice for a good month and a half after my surgery. When they pulled the ventilator tube out, my vocal cords had gotten injured. So that was a fun experience. They're like, talk to us. And I'm like, I can't. So that was good.
Was you able to eat still? Was it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I had to go through feeding therapy because they wanted to make sure I wasn't going to choke on anything. So I did that and everything ended up being okay. But that was a surprise. And then I have 2 kids at home. So I've picked up some random school viruses and bugs along the way that they say is part of the course with kids at home and stuff like that. But overall, I can't complain.
Yeah. And how did they take it? I mean, did you sort of disclose much to them? I don't know what ages they are. Did you explain to them about a transplant?
Yes. So they're 10 and 7, and they've known that mommy's been sick. I've kept it, age appropriate to them. But we did work together with therapy and different counselors to make sure, because we never knew when I was going to have the surgery. So there's possibilities that, it could be while they're at school, or it could be while, so they did come and visit me in the hospital and kind of see it after I was off the vent and everything. They found it hilarious that mommy couldn't yell because I had no voice. But they've taken it in stride. They've done amazing. I credit all to the therapists and counselors that they've worked with to be able to help them. And now they're just happy that, there's not mommy's at the doctor, or, the hospital stays are a week long at best when you're sick and things like that. So it's just nice that, we can go out to dinner and I'm not sick, or we can go and do things. So it's been nice to just be back to normal.
Yeah. So they've seen the benefit, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you they tell people like my mummy's got a liver transplant? Yeah.
Yeah, their first day back to school. So I had it in July and they went back to school in August. And what did you do this summer? My mommy got a liver. So they tell everybody. And they're like, show them your scar, Mom. And I was like, no, it's okay. We don't need to show random people.
That's really cool. It's really nice. There must be a bit more sort of not planning or organization, but you say you sort of didn't know when the operation was going to be. When you've got a deceased donor, I know for me, it was like you just get a phone call and they say, okay, there's a liver now. Whereas because you were going through the process with a living donor, I presume they can sort of structure a bit more and say, okay, we'll do it on this date rather than just come in now.
Yep. So it's a twofold kind of process. I am still on the deceased donor list, so I still could receive a phone call.
Okay.
They told me, because I live so close to the hospital, that if the first phone call that they make, the person isn't able too sick, whatever the reasons might be, I would be a backup phone call. Yeah. So I lived in the need to have my phone close because we could get that phone call. But then with living donors, it's just silent. You hear nothing until you get a phone call. I only knew that it would have to be on a Friday because the teams meet on Thursday. Yeah. And then they always make their phone calls on Friday. So I knew if there was going to be a phone call, Fridays were the day. But I had just said, you know what, I'm not going to let this consume me. We're just going to continue on. We're going to do what we need to do. Yeah. Because hanging by your phone, I'm like, this isn't good for my safety. Yeah. But being on the list in general, you've got to hold on to your phone very closely. And I was looking for an O blood type, which, they had said could be either in my benefit or take forever. So I'm glad that a living donor was able to be found, because I think I would probably still be listed if. Yeah.
So if someone called you on a Friday and it wasn't the hospital, you'd run over to your phone and then be like,
Yep, that's basically, I had the caller ID ready. I was like, I knew who it was. And of course, when my nurse coordinator had called, it was like, I was so done. I'm like, I'm not even going to worry about it. It'll happen when it, is going to happen. And then she was like, we have a surgery date. I was like, oh. For what? but I got my phone call that a match was found on June 7th, and my surgery was scheduled for July 23rd.
Yeah,
so I had about a month.
What to prepare as such.
Yep.
Yeah. Had you known anyone that had a transplant? Had you spoke to anyone?
No. So I had, my uncle had a kidney transplant. My mom donated her kidney to my uncle. But that is the only individual I had ever known to needing a kidney transplant, a liver transplant, anything like that. So the power of social media allowed me to start connecting with individuals who had been in the same spot, meeting people with PSC, because most people have no idea what that is.
Yeah.
And really kind of building a community of people afterwards was really important.
I was going to say, was that something you did before or after?
That was after.
Yeah.
I started really building out a platform just for living donation. I had no idea that livers were, an option. I knew kidneys were, but learning about how long a wait list is, how, people are just, average wait times and things like that. And how people are like, oh, your liver just grows back. I was like, yeah, like it grows back. It's, it's awesome. But yeah, that really came afterwards of just really letting people know, here in the States, it's sign your driver's license. Like you can be an organ donor. It's okay. And most people just don't even know, which was, part of just letting people know and sharing your story and things like that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said you wait until after the operation, because it seems to be what most people do. There are people that I do know that have sort of sought out information and people before, but it tends to be that it's most people that have had the operation and then they're like, okay, now let's see if there's anyone else my age that's had an operation like
yes.
this.
Yes, I've met a few people, because it's also being younger with a liver transplant or a kidney transplant is, there's not many of us that, have been through it. And even some of the issues that have popped up after transplant, they're like, oh, we always work with older individuals, so this is never a problem, or things like that. So just really, voicing just the story in general and how important people feel, and really connecting with people is such a huge part of, I think, my healing journey too, is realizing that there's going to be bumps along the road. Rejection is not as scary as it sounds, and it can be fixed, which is, I would never have known that without meeting other people.
Yeah, that's it, because you hear that word for the first time and it is so scary.
Yeah.
But it's nice that you're doing so well. I mean, 6 months to me is just so fresh out. So like, what are you doing now? You're obviously a full-time mummy, which is hard work. How is your life now? What's your quality of life like?
It is so much better. I am back to work. I am back to working out. I've got my eyes set on some transplant games next year once I get cleared to officially go and travel. But being active is what saved me before my transplant, and doing the exact same thing afterwards. But life is back to normal, pre 2017 of being sick. I'm like, oh my gosh, where I'm just able to go out to dinner. We celebrated the holidays, and I was like, I'm not laying on the couch asleep.
Yeah.
I'm not in pain. I'm not on medication to make this stop. Like, I was like, oh, I forgot what this feels like.
That's what I was going to say. It's like you forget what, normal life is like as such.
Yep.
And yeah, the energy that you have and the clarity for me as well is just being able to think straight.
Yeah.
Just, not fatigued during the day. I see you're self-confessed Peloton junkie. Is that right?
I am. I am. I will say the Bike to Nowhere saved my life. It is where I built out a massive community of people that felt like they were the only ones going through things. And invisible illnesses are something that I think we keep, hidden away because people don't understand them, but really showing that, yes, right now, pre-transplant, I looked normal. but seeing how those impact you and things like that, and the community around the bike it's been huge. And I've made some lifelong friends along the way that are now donating their own organs, which I think is amazing, and something that I was like, if one life can be saved by me telling my story, then mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished. It's like passing on the good deed.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really, really good. I mean, it's so great to see, so fresh out, but doing so well.
And I mean, it's going well. I mean, we've had bumps. I'm not, I've been back in the hospital and things like that. But I think just taking what, my transplant team had, I don't know if we got handed a binder of like, these are the rules, these are the things, these are what you need to do. And they had said, you just do what you need to do and take your meds. And it's been a good ride, where I'm like, okay.
What's your pill box like at the moment? What's it got in there?
So I did one thing I wish that I would have known about transplant is there's more than one anti-rejection med.
Yeah.
And you don't have to deal with the horrible side effects of one. So I'm currently on cyclosporine and Cellcept. I started on tacrolimus, and ended up having tremors, migraines. I got super sick, which took a while because we didn't know if it was transplant related or if it was medication related. So we rode that roller coaster for a while. And then they're actually going to take me off the cyclosporine, hopefully next month, and change me to a different one that will hopefully manage the symptoms long-term better than what the cyclosporine is doing. And then what else do I have? I have Bactrim, aspirin, a heartburn medication, and then my injector pen for my Crohn's. So
are you on less or more now?
Less now, less medications, more pills, because the cyclosporine is like, I'm on a weird dose. So it's like one of these plus a couple of those other ones to make the math.
Yeah.
So more, but not as many bottles.
I guess,
would be the benefit. And then, good.
I was going to say, I take 9 milligrams, and normally they come in threes, but one time they sent them out in ones, so then you're having to take 9 tablets. Like,
oh no,
9 little capsules. It's not a problem, but it's just like you say, it looks like you've got so much more.
Yeah. We hopefully, I think I get to come off the Bactrim and the aspirin at my 6-month appointment. So fingers crossed, we'll have 2 more down.
6 months. So. And how have you felt mentally? Because like I say, 6 months is so fresh still, and I think it took me like a year really to sort of fully process it all.
Yeah, I think for me, it comes in waves of remembering that I still had a transplant, and I have to give myself grace when I do too much. My daughter's an athlete, so I know that on those days when there's sporting events and things like that, I need to take a nap. I need to rest. I've realized after transplant how important rest is, and just sitting down, not even being asleep, just sitting down and not focusing on anything has really been a game changer for me. And then at these moments when I'm like, I had a liver transplant, like that's crazy that I have somebody else's liver now keeping me alive. And I'm growing back mine as well, which is also a very odd thing to think about sometimes when I'm like, I wonder what it's at. Do we think we're like 80% now? Are we at 90? Are we still at 60? What are we working with?
That's very interesting, actually, because I never thought of that. Do they do like scans every time you go to see how much it's grown? Like a baby scan?
Yes. So I've gotten one. I got one around 3 months, and then I'll get another one at 6 months. So hopefully next month, and they'll be able to see. With my transplant, they had to build my bile ducts with my intestines. So they like to keep an eye on that because they want to make sure that nothing closed. Because with the living donors, the living donor keeps the ducts.
Yeah.
And then they have to make them for the recipient. Versus a deceased donor, you get the whole thing.
Yeah.
So they're watching those very closely just to make sure they don't close or they don't collapse and things like that. I had drains in for almost 3.5 months to keep those going, which, you know, for me, I'm like, we can keep them in as long as you guys want to let them heal as fast as possible. So.
Yeah, that's really good. And it's so nice to see you doing so well and advocating and your kids advocating for you as well.
Yep. It's been a really good ride, and I'm excited to see where the journey takes me. There's been a lot of people I've met along the way, and I was like, we could do a lot of amazing things together. And I think about that. I never would have even connected with you across across the world to say, hey, how amazing is this that we have this thing in common that you get 100%.
Yeah, that's it. I feel like there's a bond between all the transplant patients in that, you know, we can kind of understand what it's like. And it's just a connection that you can't really put a finger on. We've done a few meets here and just gone out for dinner or going to the transplant games. And there's such an atmosphere there, and it's hard to explain. Like people like you say, you've never met, but you just feel like you have an instant connection.
Yep.
This is pretty cool. And I think you'll love the games for that reason, especially if you're a little bit competitive as well.
I am so excited. I heard about it through the transplant, just being on the transplant floor. Somebody was talking about, I was like, what is that? Is it just a here thing? Can anybody join? And they're like, it's like a worldwide thing. I was like, I can't wait. Please. So once they clear me, I'm very excited to
you'll love it.
Be able to participate.
It's so good. It's so good. And you know, hopefully we'll meet up at one day.
I'm excited. I was like, look at all these people that I've met online, and I was like, good to meet each other in real life. So I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join me on the podcast.
Of course.
It's been a great pleasure talking to you, and I hope you have a great day.
You too.
Thank you very much, and we'll speak soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.